Is Christianity gay? This title is admittedly very spicy, but let's talk about what happens when a religion loses its aspect of the divine feminine. It gets very gay, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. So I want to start with bell hooks. When bell hooks wrote that patriarchy has no love for women, she wasn't being metaphorical. She meant that under patriarchy, in patriarchal religion, which we're going to talk about, men are not taught to love women. They're taught to possess women or manage women or take care of women, but love, emotional intimacy, devotion, loyalty, vulnerability is reserved for other men. And we're going to see this in patriarchal religion. Christianity reserves its deepest love, its deepest loyalty, devotion for other men in the church, for Jesus, and for God, who is male. So all love is directed towards men. So Christianity is not entirely gay in the sexual sense, but it is homosocial in the emotional, relational, and spiritual sense. And then we'll talk about how homosocial environments actually create homophobia and why that happens. So patriarchal societies create male-to-male loyalty bonds, and women exist to support those bonds, to produce heirs, to elevate men's spiritual status. But emotional intimacy, spiritual sacrificial love, moral loyalty are exchanged between men or between men and their male gods. So when Bell Hooks says patriarchy is a love ethic between men, she means that men learn to see other men as the real subjects who matter. Women are background characters in a story written for men, about men, through men, by men. And Christianity, especially American conservative Christianity, has reenacted that script for centuries. So here are the ways that I think Christianity funnels love towards men and how it overtly undermines women, and then how it gets semi-gay. So first of all the heroes are men, right? The stories are all men. The emotional loyalty runs towards men. The central emotional attachments of Christianity are loving God the Father, loving Jesus the Son, following Paul the Apostle, obeying pastors, elders, bishops, overwhelmingly men, submitting to husbands, who are men, admiring great men of faith, Abraham, Moses, David, Joseph, Peter. Where in that spiritual infrastructure does a woman receive, or even the divine feminine, receive devotion or admiration or reciprocal love or emotional recognition as a woman? She doesn't. Women are helpers, helpmeets, they're servants, they are wombs, they are supporters, they are objects of purity, they are temptations, they are background labor, but they're never the subject of love in the Christian moral imagination. Now, everybody's saying, what about Mary? What about Mary? Even the most revered woman in the tradition, she's not honored as a woman. She is not there for her wisdom. She is not there for, any opinion that she has. She's there as a vessel, a representation of virginity and obedience. She is not there for her autonomy or her perspective. She's there because of what she carries. Second, loyalty is to other men. So take the standard sermon. You must love your brothers, fight for your brothers, stand with your brothers. All these hymns have this warlike kind of hymns, like the battle hymn for the Republic. We're fighting for Jesus. If you go on Instagram today, especially after the death of Charlie Kirk, you see men at the gym saying, we're building an army of brothers for Jesus, right? There's lots of that. And women, again, are not appearing in the moral imagination except as wives to be led, daughters to be protected, temptresses to avoid, and helpers in the home or the church, but they are not the objects of devotional love. And when a man in the church is disloyal to his wife, men help other men cover that up, to lie for him, to tell the wife that men stray, that she needs to forgive and she needs to stay with her husband. But the church does not forgive the church does forgive man's disloyalty to his wife. The church historically does not forgive women for deciding not to be loyal to their husbands or to the institution. So the emotional energy of Christianity is male bonding and male obedience to other men and a male God. And so I want to talk now about Nick Fuentes, because he is the perfect contemporary example, because he says the quiet part out loud. So he openly mocks heterosexual relationships. He glorifies male brotherhood. He frames women as distractions, degenerates, gold diggers, threats to, male political cohesion. And he's not an outlier. He's the most explicit version of something baked into Christian National from the beginning, that the fantasy of this world of men is strong men, loyal to other men, ordering society together. Women aren't companions. They are not partners. They are roles and they are support systems. And he is a virgin. He has been rejected by women. And so it's hilarious when Tucker Carlson asks him, hey, why aren't young men getting married? What's the problem here with marriage? And he says, it's the women. And so Nick Fuentes is the perfect kind of caricature of Christianity because it shows us that he doesn't see women as people. He actually doesn't like women at all. And so recently Piers Morgan asked him, are you attracted to women? He says quickly, yes. And that because it's so clear, like Piers Morgan is asking this because it's so clear that Nick Fuentes loves men. And Nick Fuentes says, yes, I'm attracted to women. And then Piers Morgan asks, are you gay? And there's this long pause, this long awkward pause. And he looks to the side and he goes, no, I'm not gay, but I do find women to be difficult to be around. And he's saying this out loud. This is kind of sometimes subtle in Christianity. You don't see this at first, but he's saying these things out loud, that he sees women as objects that need to submit to a man and that her job is to worship him. And it was to the point that even Tucker Carlson, who is not known for his liberal values, was like, Jesus, like, I don't think men with big egos need women to worship them at home. Like, you need a woman who can kind of call you out on your bullshit sometimes. Like, Nick Fuentes, like this was too much even for Tucker Carlson. And so what Fuentes is articulating, he's articulating the emotional subtext that patriarchal men feel but never articulate, that I feel safer with men, I am loyal to men, women are foreign to me, I don't really see them as people, I don't really like women. The real action here is male to male, but I'm okay with a woman if they just support me and worship me and do what I tell them to do, and I can have sex with it like a doll, right? Like that is literally what he is saying. So Adrian Rich coined the term compulsory heterosexuality and argued that patriarchies force heterosexual marriage not because men love women, but because women are a resource, emotional, sexual, reproductive, in a male identified world. So women are a resource, but men are the ones that are in love with each other and are loyal to each other. And it is a male love system with women just as a resource in the hierarchy supporting the male fantasy of the world. And this is one reason why Christian nationalism skews so heavenly male. It promises male belonging, it rewards male obedience, it worships male leaders, it defines women only in relation to men. And so Christian nationalism at its core is a male bonding and identity project in reaction to feminism. This is not a spiritual project. We're not seeing young men all of a sudden be reading, the Good Samaritan story or the Sermon on the Mount and having these spiritual experiences and wanting to be more like Jesus. None of this is a spiritual project. Christian nationalism is an identity project for men in reaction to feminism. So why does this matter for deconstructing people? For people leaving Christianity, especially women, they often describe kind of the same experience. I never felt like a real person in that system. Christianity gave them purpose and service roles and moral duties and domestic identities, but it really will never love them as a full human being if you are queer, or if you are a non-leadership kind of man, or if you are a woman. Because in Christianity, devotion flows upward. Woman to husband, husband to pastor, pastor to Jesus, Jesus to God. It never really flows the other direction. So women very rarely in Christianity receive spiritual love. They give it upward. And their invisible labor is what keeps churches going. So when people half jokingly ask, is Christianity gay? What they mean is, does Christianity reserve its deepest forms of love, admiration, loyalty, devotion, spiritual, emotional energy for men, while asking women to just serve as supporting characters? And when you look at the pastor scandals, the male dominated church hierarchies, the Christian nationalist masculinity movements, the Nick Fuentes style male bonding and anti-woman rhetoric, obsession with male prophets, male headship, male obedience. It's not hard to see the pattern. Christianity is not always sexually gay, but it is profoundly homosocial. It is a religion designed for men, by men, about men, where women are spiritually adjacent but never spiritually central, because that destroys the whole hierarchy, that destroys the whole patriarchy game that is being played here. And this is why you can't have Asherah in Christianity, the original consort to the high God. For this male bonding experiment to work, for men to be God, God has to be man. And so there is no space in this structure for a divine feminine. Now, sometimes we try in Christianity to fill that gap with Mary, but again, Mary is not a whole human character. She is not like the gods that we have before agriculture. Before agriculture, before patriarchy, we had very complex female gods. We have Pele, who has, the power of volcanoes, and she can be angry, but then she also has healing springs and medicinal waters. There's lots of wisdom that we see in female goddesses before patriarchy. Mary's not like that. She's not a whole human character. She's a vessel. And I really didn't understand Mary, doctrinally. I didn't understand why we're making such a big deal out of Mary when there's little doctrinal reason to do so, until I went to Rome. And when I went to Rome, when I actually visited there, you see so many images of like scary, distant, demanding father, and so many images of like hell and Dante kind of stuff, that it made us want a mommy. And so we kind of made a mommy out of Mary, even though there's no doctrinal reason to do so, because we are just so craved for mommy. So yes, Mary's there, but I just don't see her as being the same kind of goddess that we see before patriarchy, where they were full, they had more of a full human expression. But in order for patriarchal religion to work, God has to be man. We cannot worship the feminine if we need female subordination. You have to have women disconnected from their bodies and no divine feminine. So we demand that their bodies be covered for modesty reasons, even though when they asked Jesus, like, hey, what do we do with all these hot women around us? Jesus was like, hey, have you tried plucking your eye out, freak? Like, even with that, very clearly in scripture, we really disconnect women from their feelings, from their body, from their intuitions. We tell them that their doubts are from Satan. We tell them to smile and be good girls. They start talking like this. If you see Christian women, they just talk like this, almost like they're a child, right? And we tell them that their bodies are things to be overcome. We tell them that their feelings can't be trusted. And when we take women out of their bodies, and when we take out the feminine aspect of God, then men have an easier time with their love project to each other, right? And when I first left Christianity, I didn't fully see this. I saw and experienced some aspects of patriarchy, but I had internalized so much that I didn't see this at first. So when I first left Christianity, I wanted to take Jesus with me, because there's a lot to love about Jesus. But part of my journey now to decenter men and recover from internalized patriarchy was also recognizing that the reason that we value femininity in Jesus is because it comes with a penis, right? Like, if Jesus was a woman and he was kind to children and kind to sex workers and loving and forgiving, what would we say? We would say, oh, there's an average woman. Why am I only valuing the feminine? Why am I only valuing that softness when it comes in the form of the masculine? Why direct my love and devotion to Jesus when historical Jesus is just an average woman, just an average one of my female friends? And if a woman ever does miracles, she's not worshipped, she's burned, because it's too powerful to have women doing shit in patriarchy. It subverts the whole project. And that's when I stopped calling myself a follower of Christ, even though I did call myself that when I left organized religion. For a time, I was more like a secular Christian, where I didn't believe in any of the metaphysical truth claims, but I still found a lot of value in trying to be like Jesus. But I stopped calling myself that because it felt it felt wrong in this way. It felt like I was elevating this kind of behavior because it came from a man, when this is just average. This would be an average woman. And so why am I worshiping it? And so patriarchal Christianity works only because women misrecognize the system as love, not because they're naive, but because the system is designed that way. Bell Hooks said patriarchy has no love for women. And when you map that onto Christianity, what you see is men get God, men get Jesus, men get the pulpit, men get the spiritual intimacy, they get the covenant and the brotherhood and the loyalty oaths and the emotional vulnerability rituals disguised as ministry, and women get service. And once you see that, you see everything. You see why medieval Christianity built entire monastic cultures where men lived, studied, prayed, embraced, and died in each other's arms. And then while women were, silent and blamed for the fall. And Christian monks wrote amazing poetry to each other that would read shockingly romantic by modern standards. So some quotes are like, "You are bone of my bone. I burn with your absence. Your embrace is sweeter than wine." So monastic brotherhood was explicitly elevated above marriage, and a monk's deepest loyalty was to his brothers, not to any woman, and marriage was considered a lower spiritual calling. You also see this in the Crusades, where knights took vows to male saints, pledged fealty to Christ as their liege lord, and were constantly framing battles to kind of prove their love to him while their wives were legally property. You see it in the Reformation, where Martin Luther praised marriage but still taught that women should bear children until they die of it, because the real work of God was in the hands of men. You see it in evangelical purity culture, where boys are taught that they are warriors for God, and girls are taught that they are stumbling blocks for those warriors. You see it in American Christian nationalism, where men like Nick Fuentes shout that women are distractions from the real love object, which is male power consolidation, male identity. Nick Fuentes, this is a direct quote, says, "Men should live with men, form communities with men, and avoid women until marriage. We need to return to a male-led Christian society." We have Paul's pastoral letters, where he uses language like, "My beloved son in the faith, I long to see you, my joy and crown." But for women, he calls them helpers and workers and laborers and sisters, but never the objects of deep affection. And scholars have noted even the emotional intimacy between Jesus and the disciple whom Jesus loved. Again, not explicitly sexual, but showing this male-to-male devotional love that Christianity elevates as holy. And then when you look at the 1990s and you remember the Promise Keepers, these are men's stadium rallies where they cried together and they held hands and they declared loyalty to male leaders. They promised to stand together as brothers, and women were not allowed in the stadium. So women are necessary, but they can never be central. So Christianity removed Asherah, Sophia, this concept of female wisdom, female prophets, female apostles were either erased fully or minimized. So I stopped calling myself a Christ follower, not because Jesus is bad. I want to be clear. I still love many of these parables. I'm still inspired by many of them. But because patriarchal religion makes even Jesus serve this male project. And this is the thing that I wish someone had told me sooner. If a religion cannot survive women being whole, women being connected to their bodies, it cannot survive the future. And Christian nationalism knows this. That's why it's panicking. That's why it's doubling down. That's why it's creating boy-only spaces in this performative brotherhood project. This is why Christian nationalism skews male. This is why Andrew Tate is popular and Jordan Peterson is resonating. This is why the Proud Boys call each other brother more often than they talk about their wives. They're not forming heterosexual communities. They are forming homosocial ones, with women doing the invisible labor to support that. And once women stop doing that, once women step out of the background, once women rediscover their bodies and their boundaries and their intuition and their personhood, and connect even to aspects of divine feminine, the whole architecture of the thing starts to shake. And that's what we're watching right now. A religion built on male emotional communion, trying to hold itself up without women quietly supplying all the support and the labor, and the truth is that it can't. That's why this conversation matters. That's why Christianity is freaking the fuck out about Gen Z women, because patriarchy needs women as the silent, subservient foundation for this. And if you start seeing women as people, or women even as divine, the whole religion falls apart. And so I think one way to combat Christian nationalism, jokingly, of course, like for me, like my brother is gay, like I have so many gay friends, like it is not an insult to be gay. It's only an insult, for this particular kind of man. But one way to combat Christian nationalism is maybe to just be like, oh, I didn't know you were gay. Like when you walk into a church and you see Jesus half naked, always very ripped, right? And our prayers to a male God about how we're going to kneel for this God, and our hymns about our love for our Christian brothers in the fight, and Nick Fuentes, pastor, who obviously hates women. And we can just say, oh, I didn't know you were gay. Like, oh, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm just, I'm not gay, so I like my religion to have some female aspects to it. Like, I didn't know you were gay. And Larry David, I can't play the clip or it's going to get pulled here on YouTube, but he does a bit on this where I think that's his father-in-law, when he's married to what's-her-face, is wearing one of those Jesus nails. And he says, you're nuts about this Jesus guy. And he says, I could see worshiping a Jane, but worshiping a guy, isn't that a little gay? And there's something so poignant in that joke, where the men who like try to clamp down on homosexuality are in a religion that is so loving to the masculine. And are we surprised then that so many are in the closet fighting against homosexuality, because you're in a system where you're trained to save all your love for men? Like, why are we surprised then that Grindr shuts down at a Republican National Convention? And this is where it starts to get spicy, because you may be asking, like, why don't men just be gay? Like, if they love each other so much, go over there and be gay. Like, fantastic. But what homophobia does in this system is it keeps the love flowing, but it stops at eroticism, because if you don't stop there, it's going to damage the hierarchy. So you have to keep women below you in the patriarchy. So Eve Sedgwick in Between Men famously argued that intensely patriarchal cultures that create strong male-to-male bonds that are very emotionally charged, devotional, and intimate must never be acknowledged as erotic, because that destabilizes the hierarchy. So the core idea that she wrote about was that homosocial desire is the glue of patriarchal society, and homophobia exists to keep those bonds from becoming erotic, which means men love men, men are loyal to men, men want admiration and intimacy for other men, but they have to disavow any feeling that hints at eroticism. Because then if you just have men being in love with other men, even sexually, then women could just walk around and take over the world. Like, we can't have that. So you have to bring in women for that erotic piece, so that you keep the hierarchy. So this is all happening like subconsciously, but Christianity is centering men and these male devotional bonds, but then polices male eroticism with absolute terror, right? Like, people will ask, like, why is Christianity so offended by homosexuality? Because this tradition produces homoerotic closeness, which means that you have to have aggressive homophobia to make sure that the hierarchy is still working. And that's the deepest reason for why Christian men are homophobic. It's because that is the byproduct of intense love for men with a desire to keep women in the hierarchy at the bottom, which means you have to be partnered to women and you have to get women to be subservient to you, which means you get homophobia. And that homophobia allows you to still be married, but keep going with the project of centering and loving men. And that allows the system to keep running and taking over the world. Even the Bible itself says the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. We don't get a scripture like that really between a love of a man towards a woman. And David, upon Jonathan's death, says, your love for me was wonderful, more wonderful than the love of women. That is a wild thing to say in a patriarchal text. That is one of the clearest examples of homosocial behavior that Christian men inherit. And so you honestly wouldn't have to have so many rules about homosexuality in Christianity if they just liked women as people. You have to have homophobia because men love men so goddamn much and see women as so other that you have to clamp down on the eroticism, or else it just turns into women taking care of themselves and not needing men. And then it's a big sausage fest, but you can't have a sausage fest with no support staff. So homophobia is the strongest in homosocial cultures. And this is a well-established truth across anthropology, sociology of masculinity, queer theory, religious studies. The more a culture depends on intense male-to-male bonding, the more fiercely it's going to police male eroticism. So an example would be ancient Sparta, strong homoerotic bonds, plus then strict codes. Victorian England had male homosocial clubs, a lot of panic over homosexuality. U.S. evangelicalism has lots of men's ministries, promise keepers, purity culture, warrior for Jesus, also severe homophobia. This is why the most aggressively homophobic Christian men obsess over masculine purity. They fear softness. They feel threatened by male vulnerability. They cling to these male-only spaces because they are disavowing their own homoerotic longings almost. And we have to remember that the entire church is a bride to Christ. Like everyone's married to Jesus. And Christian art is full of like Christ exposing his wounded side and men caressing Christ's broken body and St. John embracing Jesus and monks swooning in ecstasy, gazing at crucifixes. Like it's homoerotic imagery framed as holy. So the next time someone tells you that they are Christian when they're one of those like terrible white male Christian nationalist types, just say, oh, I didn't know you were gay. That won't bother them at all. So this is something, does this explain everything about Christianity and patriarchy? No, but I do think it's an interesting lens through which to view Christianity, which is this idea of it being a homosocial religion that clamps down on, homosexuality because you have to keep the eroticism down so that you keep women in their place and keep the system going. And I think Nick Fuentes in the past week with his 2 interviews with Tucker Carlson and Piers Morgan, he actually said all these things out loud, where most of this is kind of subtle. Like you have to maybe have someone, especially if you were raised in Christianity, you might have to have someone explain it so that you can see it. But Nick Fuentes is saying it out loud, which makes him such a fascinating character that we shouldn't be platforming, but at least like he's saying these things out loud, that Christianity is so gay. It hates women. Like women have to stop centering Jesus because I think it indirectly supports this project. And I think we can value everything that Jesus did or value him as a person without centering him. So for me, part of my journey in depatriarchying my spirituality is that Jesus is a part of my spirituality, but he's not centered there anymore. Because in truth, maybe he's just an average woman. What do you think?